What it do, y'all? It's your boy Ken Crowder checking back in with another edition of a book review that we all should add to our list and we all should be reading. Up next is a book called The Color of Law by Richard Rothstein. The reason why this book is so phenomenal, it's a deep dive into segregation, housing, and how loans were infiltrated in the U.S. history. The book is called The Color of Law. That's how the book is written by this gentleman. A little bit about the author. He's actually a well-known author, an academician. He's Harvard educated, and his research and concentration focus is on segregation in the classroom and in education inside the United States. It was three main points that were phenomenal about this book that everyone should read about. Number one, if you look at all U.S. metropolitan cities within the United States, any of the black population is systematically segregated from the current white population in the city. What do I mean? I've traveled all throughout this United States, and every time you go to certain locations, you will always see the black Americans located in either the inner city areas or the lower segregated areas of town. For example, if you go to Chicago, you will always notice that blacks are very much isolated on the south side. If you go to Atlanta, you will notice an area called the Bluff that is geographically and economically isolated from most parts of town. If you go to Miami, Florida, you will notice some area called Liberty City, which is economically isolated from the most of the part of town. If you go to Houston, Texas, and you go into the city, you will notice the 3rd, the 4th, and the 5th ward are geographically isolated and economically isolated from the rest of the part of the towns. If you go to LA and you go to South Central, Inglewood, some of these areas, you will notice that many of the black Americans are pushed and segregated this way. This book dives into how that happened. Number one, when the loans were issued out, FHA loans, black residents were forced to live in certain areas by only getting pre-approved to live in what they call red zones. Red zones where the black Americans had to live. It was U.S. law that was enforced and strictly granted by the loan and mortgage companies to say, if you are black American, you only qualify to live inside of town. This gentleman gave a great example of how 98% of the black Chicago residents had subprime mortgages compared to their white counterparts. Why is it such a big deal? If you look at the economic inequality, you see why it happens. One thing I want everybody to remember about history that is so important, history is the subject of cause and effect. What caused it to happen? This is the everlasting effect of it. Number two, you begin to see why the U.S. government was so intertwined with the racist law of this time and currently still happen. Did you hear me? The U.S. government was inside of the segregation, enforcing the segregation, and still actively participating in the segregation. That was something that was truly mind-boggling to me, that know that laws on the books were written and strictly enforced. The number third most incredible thing you learned about this history of redlining was just how systemic and how widespread it is. This gentleman did phenomenal research on how widespread it is to small rural towns, metropolitan areas, and other districts and towns. The only criticism I would have on this author is that the book is not long enough. That is my only criticism I would say. I wish he could have dove a little bit more into that information to pull out some of the resources and trinkets that were not given. But this book was so well written because it gave so many real world examples. It gave Lewis Law's court cases to look up. The reference material was just phenomenal. I would highly recommend this book to anybody that's an avid reader about history. I am an avid reader about U.S. history myself, and telling the truth about hidden gems that we do not discuss or we do not talk about. 5 stars. I highly recommend that everybody get this to the collection and read. It is an eye-opening experience to learn and understand. I want you guys to remember something about me, because I'm a history guru myself, historian, whatever you want to call it. The subject of history is the story of his side of the story, meaning the white Americans or the black Americans. And it's also the study of the cause and effects. If you ever get that into your mental whenever you discover a historical event, you will begin to broaden your way of thinking, and you will start thinking of that way whenever you hear these actions being drawn upon. I want to thank y'all for chiming in again on my review of the Color of Law book by the author Richard. It was a great read. I highly recommend you getting it. I want to thank y'all for checking back in with me, baby. Peace.